Hi, everyone. Cindy Skalicki here with On Point Communications. Really excited to have you with me for this episode of Getting to the Point. This is our interview series where we bring in an expert in his or her field to share some tips and expertise to help you right now in your business today. And I'm really excited to bring to you a new friend of mine, Susan Harrow. And Susan is part of PR. She's the CEO over at prsecrets.com, which is a website you can go visit right now or after this episode runs to learn more about her services there. But I have my cheat sheet of her awesome sauce, and it is impressive. She is a media trainer. She is a marketing specialist, and wait for it, she's in martial arts. So I'm going to have Susan explain a little more about what she does with all of you. But we met through LinkedIn, right, Susan? That's kind
Yeah.
of how we got
And
kicked
I
off.
rarely comment on anybody's. I mean, I know my mentor says I should be doing that all the time, but I'm not much of a super big commenter. But I loved your piece on your daughter, and I just felt called. And I think part of what when we're moved, I mean, part of when you have your gypsy spirit, it's like when you're moved to do something, do it. When you're moved to connect with somebody, do it. And I think that's a big part of PR too. It's like if you're not feeling it and you're resistant to it, then it's not going to flow well. So there's a practice too to getting into the feel of it, right? Like sometimes we don't feel like it, or we need to be connected to people, but I think that there's really a practice of connecting with people too that I think is a big part of executive presence.
Absolutely. And you and I both have an appreciation and a love for how to show up in communications, especially in terms of media and interviews. And that's one of the reasons I immediately wanted to connect with you, because in your LinkedIn profile, you talk about being a in media strategy and developing people for these kinds of interviews and executive presence inside of those kinds of interviews, which are very forgive the pun, harrowing for a lot of people.
I hate that
um,
you use that,
didn't
but
plan
fair
that
enough.
one.
Yeah.
Yes. But can you tell us just a smidge about your career path up to now and what has been some of your passion parts of that journey?
It really started when I was in junior high, and I was part of like three different groups. I was part of the artsy group, I was part of the smart kids group, and I was a part of the athletes group. And I
Okay.
wasn't in just one group. And one day I saw a kid beating up on another kid, and there was a huge crowd around him, and he was pummeling him. And when I got
Oh,
up there, I saw it was one of my artsy friends, and I'm like, why is he doing this? And I went and grabbed him off and pulled him off my friend and said, what are you all looking at? Just get away. And I think that was the really beginning of me protecting misfits, the artists, the
hmm.
the outliers of our world, because they're really like the innovators and the big
Hmm.
thinkers, the ones that sometimes are the outcasts or the people who are a little different. And then that's what I do today. I really work with the B Corps, the people who are doing the social good or doing something like intensely creative or wild. Like
Wow.
one of my clients is called the Ganja Guru, and I media trained him 18 years ago, and yeah, it was when the federal and the state laws of marijuana, of cannabis, were conflicting, and so he
Okay.
could have gone to jail for 5 years, and I media trained him for Dateline, partly to keep him out of jail, right?
Wow.
And
Oh my
then
goodness.
he's just circled back 18 years later, because I was like, wow, it's been a long time since we've talked.
Right.
And this time he was on Nova, and it was
Mm.
talking about the shifting laws in Virginia where they can
Mhm.
now, grow, I forgot what it was, how many plants, 4 plants or whatever, but he was talking about that. But I bring that up because it's, people like that who are like, go really thinking about the big picture of how we want to shift our world and what's
Mm.
important, preventing
Right.
sexual slavery, food insecurity, to me, education, all of those things are AI for good.
Mhm.
Amazon AI for good was one of my clients too. So
Wow.
using that, yeah. So that's what really fascinates me is those people and those things on the cutting edge of really truly making our world a better, different place for everyone, like in all
Yeah.
areas.
I
Yeah.
love that. And you want to kind of protect them and also set them up for the success of what they can experience when they bring their message to the world, right? Because you know that, I guess proverbially, they might get pummeled online or in the interview, and you want to pull off, the bad guy and set them up for success. Let me reflect on the awesome way that you brought that storyline in and then shared it with how you work with clients today. I was like, where is she going with this schoolyard story? But you nailed it. So well done.
And that's what I call a signature story. Why do you do what you do? And I have a
Yep.
number of them, and so should you. But that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. I could trace it back to
I love it.
my childhood. And you can't. It's not always that way, but but where you're always going to be asked, why do you do what you do?
Right.
Why did you
Right.
start your company? Why did you write your book? Why do you do what
Yep.
you do? So that's a question that everyone needs to be
That's
prepared with.
such great advice. I have a couple of my own, of course, that I also use, which I won't tell here now, but one of them is around the first assignment that I ever had in a
I
rhetoric
watched that
class.
video of yours.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then one of
I
them,
love
but
that. Yeah.
origin stories are such great ways to launch into any kind of long-term conversation,
And I heard
which,
somebody call it a hero's journey story too.
oh, sure,
It's kind of
sure.
interesting. So
That's
you are the
right.
hero of your own journey, but
Right.
I
Right.
think it's yeah, we really want to hear that personal part of you.
Yes.
I think that more than your business, not everybody wants to hear about your business, but they're more interested
Right.
in your personal life, and
I love it.
that's been true for a long time, but it's more true now. And
Yep.
it's even true for bigger brands, specifically for
Mhm.
now we want to know what a company stands for
Mhm.
and how, what their policies and politics are as well.
Yes.
So it's
For
very
better
difficult
or
to
for
talk
worse,
that. For
right?
better or for
Exactly.
worse, but that's something that you should be
Yeah.
prepared for and to be also put to the forefront, like be
Mhm.
ahead of the curve and talk about what's important to you within your company and outside in the world.
Yep, exactly. Well, it's a good transition into point one. We do 3 points here at getting to the point. Let's jump in and do point number one, which really speaks to some tips you're going to give to us around executive presence, right? When it comes to media interviews and what people ought to be thinking about if they've got a call or something set up. Talk to us a little bit about what you advise people to do so that they can exude that executive presence in a media interview.
Master yourself to master the media.
Mhm.
So doing PR is just as much personal development as it is professional development. And really,
Mhm.
when you're at the level of doing like a national TV show, but even a podcast like this, what shows up first is, and I know you know about this too, but it's oh my God, now I forgot the term. Split. Do you know what I'm talking about? So we get you in a quarter of a second, like
Yes.
a quarter of a second. So
Second, first
everything that
impression.
right, so it's everything that you bring to bear. But what's
Hmm.
fascinating in the literature and in the neuroscience is it's not just the first impression that's most important, but now it's the last is the lasting impression.
Mm.
So yeah, so when you are on a show, you want to make sure that you start very, just like any presentation or speech,
Mhm.
starting strong and ending strong. And one of the ways that you do that is by planning your points. So you want to have your key messages down, at least typically like six of them to weave into the conversation.
Mhm.
But part of executive presence is being relaxed when
Mhm.
you deliver. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. So there's techniques to prepare to prepare that build within you, that build that mental and muscle memory. And then there are techniques in the moment. So there's really sort of two sets of things that I do with clients in terms of building their mental and muscle memory. And that's through role play, but it's through
Yes.
actually putting you through those scenarios. And the
Mhm.
reason why you want to do that is the research shows and the neuroscience shows by George Lowenstein is that oftentimes we don't, there's a gap between thinking about it and the emotion that comes up,
Yes. Like
right?
you think that you think
You think
what you
what you're
have
gonna
in your
say,
head is going to
yes,
come out of your
and it
mouth.
doesn't.
It never
You
does.
actually have to do it, right?
Yes.
Right. You think what's gonna, you're like, I've thought about this and I've run it through my mind. No, it has to run through your mouth
Yes.
and through your body.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yes. I literally just got off a call an hour ago with client that I'm helping with client calls. So it's not media necessarily, but we role played the 5-minute status update that he
Okay.
needs to do.
Yes.
And he learned very quickly that what he thought he was going to say, he didn't say. And so we
That's
ran
right.
it 3 more times and he
That's
got
right.
it down. But that's a great tip. What do you say about mindset, Susan, for people who are watching or listening, who are just, gripped by nervousness or fear when the question asker has stopped asking the question, that very small second in between. So what do you think about that? And then boom, suddenly the nerves are there, the flushed face, the heart rate. How do you help people with the mindset part of that?
Yeah, I call it mindset and heart set. So it's
Mm,
really both. So before you're even in the media interview, what you want to do is you can put your hands on your heart because actually, and you can do this in private, right? Like,
yeah.
it's not a public thing. So you would put your hands on your heart so you actually connect to yourself and feel your body. Because
Mm,
what happens when we get nervous is we go into our heads and we start to spin
yes.
no longer in our
Great point.
yeah. So just do this so you can be in your body ahead of
Mm,
time. Feel your own hand. And then what you want to do is, and I know you were talking about this in your last interview, you want to look at the dot like I'm looking at now.
mhm.
So I'm looking at you. So we're talking about Zoom or a camera. But if this dot is a person, you want to look into the person's
Yes.
face.
Yes, you do.
So you want to give soft eyes or
Mm,
receptive eyes. So before you're in the interview, you want to be thinking of someone or something that you love. It can be a pet if you don't, a pet, a baby, a person. So get the warm feeling in your body first before the
mm,
interview. And then you have
great.
the soft gaze to the person because we connect neurologically through our eyes.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so that's the first thing. And then when in the moment when you, oh my God, I don't know what to say.
Yes,
So we tend to hold our breath,
yes,
So the first thing is to remember to breathe.
yes.
So
That
just the one breath,
diaphragmatic breathing, right?
right? But
Yes.
just even in that moment, just take the breath because it'll seem like a long time. It's not. Feel your feet on the floor. And
Hmm.
then if you need a phrase, because, to buy time, you can always say, I don't know about that. And what I do know is.
Oh, great.
You can always use that even if you know the answer. Or you can say, I mean, don't use this a lot, but you can use it once. Oh my God, that's such a fascinating question.
Yes, yes.
So just getting your
Those are
mouth
two great.
moving,
Yes,
right?
everybody,
Like,
you just got two
yeah,
gifts.
thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But only use
Super.
that once per interview
Oh,
if
yeah. Otherwise, your credibility is going to go down
yeah,
and you look unprepared
just to
and
buy time.
absolutely. Yes.
And
And
just one of my pet
pausing.
peeves, I'm going to just say, don't say the interviewer's name over and over and over and over again. Like,
Right. Maybe once or twice, but
yeah,
not every time, because then
yeah,
you are kind
to
of buying
establish
time
rapport, right?
or
Yeah,
right.
but
Right.
that can really save your skin and
Hmm.
but just remembering to breathe. And that's why you want to practice, and that's what we do in role play. We ask the worst case scenario questions. We ask the questions you don't want to be asked. We ask all the
Hmm.
surprise questions. So when you do that, you're already used to it. So by the
Right.
time it have if and it, then it doesn't really usually happen in an actual interview because you've practiced it so many times and you recognize the feeling. So it's familiar now. So it's not so scary.
Right.
Our feelings are scary when we haven't experienced them before or we haven't had that experience,
Right.
which most people haven't.
Well, and I'm imagining that you do a lot of work around visualization of the actual interview prior to it happening. And that probably has a lot of power because if you can't experience the real interview until it happens, but you can try, at least in your mind's eye, to imagine what it will be like. And not just to imagine what it will be like, but to imagine yourself succeeding in that moment and not imagining yourself feeling
Yeah,
nervous.
and it's not just visual imagery, it's feeling. So it's all the
Mhm.
senses. It's the athletes, this book that I'm reading now, which I've already done because I'm a former tennis pro and a black belt
Okay,
in Aikido.
super.
And
Mhm.
one of the things that I do, and I trained even as a tennis teacher, tennis pro, is that you need to get into your mental and muscle memory. And what that means is all the senses: feel, hear, see, smell. So it's not just visualizing yourself,
Right.
it's feeling what it feels like in that situation and then trying to replicate that as closely as possible. So
Yes.
when clients come out of town to media train with me, we go to the CNN studio
Mhm.
so they can get, well, here's
Yeah.
the cameras, lights, here's
Yes.
the here's the dot, for the remote interview.
Love it.
So they have the feeling of the cameras going in and out, the lights, the background, because you can't have that experience
Yeah.
otherwise if you've never done it. And then, the lights are shining in your eyes and you get the countdown, and then
Mhm.
you're like, and that's when you're like freaking out, right?
Like, oh my
Like,
gosh, we're going live in three.
yeah. And then they ask you something that they said, wait, we've gone through all of these questions, and then they ask you a question has not been, that they've
Not
told
on the
you.
books,
Not
and
on.
then you're sweating. Yeah.
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 And that happens so often.
It does. Well, and they sometimes they want that to be
They want
the
you to be fresh. They don't want to
yes,
hear your rehearsed. They don't want to hear what you've practiced. I want you to say what you've practiced, but in a fresh way. But they want
exactly.
something absolutely fresh that you haven't ever rehearsed, that you've never said before. And that's why they
And
do it.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's a good segue into our second point, which is a lot around prepping for like print, TV, radio, podcast stuff, so that, and I wrote this down, so that your appearance has the real effect of your growing business, right? So can you
To grow
speak a
your
little bit?
business, to have a real,
Yes.
yeah. So this is not just about entertaining. I mean, you want to inspire, entertain, and educate. That's what the media is looking for you to do. And you also want to serve yourself.
Hmm.
So in serving yourself, we look at what is it that you want to have happen from your media appearance. Now, it's
Hmm.
great that you're interviewed by the New York Times or Forbes or Inc. or whatever, but what do you want to result from that? And then we backtrack to say, what are the questions you want to be, what are the answers you want to give, and then what questions will lead you there.
Right.
So one of the things that you for sure want is you want to talk about your client successes or your customer
Hmm.
success, but in such a way that it speaks to, um, what the audience wants to, so
Yep.
it benefits them in some way. And that's a way of talking about what's important to you, your success through your clients. You want to have a story that gives an example of something that you do. So for my speaker clients, people who speak, I want you to tell an example. I want them to tell an example from speaking,
Right. For sure.
so people know that you speak, and to address exactly what, and it can sound, as simple as when I was speaking to this corporation, the question that people ask me most is,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and then you can go into that. So that's not
Yep.
a client success story, but it shows people that you can be booked for speaking. So for a
Well,
client success story, you want it to be about the clients that you want. So,
totally.
right?
And
Yeah, an
absolutely.
example.
What I think you're hitting really hard, and which is super advantageous for our listeners, is it's around strategy. There's so
It's
much
strategy. It's complete
the
strategy.
you talked earlier about, having those storylines that match whatever your intro is going to be, or however you're going to hook up to your, from your past to your present. But this is exactly what I think a lot of people maybe just don't know how to do. Where do you pick from success stories or case studies and match them with the audience, so that you're advancing, like you said, advancing your business, trying to grow prospects, and informing people about what you do without being salesy and, super in your face. And it's a great, great tip. Do you have thoughts on how people can get started thinking about that if that's not really core to them? How do you kind of start people off in that process?
Yeah, so a very quick uh, sort of template is, where did your client or customer begin? What did you do to help them and support them? What problem did you solve? And what was the result? And the
Hmm.
result is either quantitative, something measurable in numbers, like
Hmm.
something that we can, or something that we can see, feel, hear, or it's transformational, which is
Hmm.
moving a person from one state to another. So
Right.
for example, one of my clients, who I'm not going to name, but it was really interesting because in the beginning she was very flat and boring and humorless, and
Well,
and she
there
said,
you have
I
it.
want to be looser, and I want to be, and I want to be more fluid. And it turns out she did have a great sense of humor and she had a really great personality, but it wasn't coming out. And
Okay.
so, really, after 2 months of media training, where there were relaxation processes and also just getting to the, and her stories were really flat and boring. They were sort of surface stories.
Hmm.
So
Not
we
going
just
deep enough.
not going deep enough. So we just went deeper, deeper, deeper. She had some incredible stories that
Oh,
were really
yeah.
moving. Like I was actually tearing up. And then some of those stories when she started to be able to be more relaxed,
Mhm.
to talking about, she really became thought leader, a
Oh,
thought
I
leader,
love
and
it.
speaking about, she had all the statistics and she had the opinions about how a particular part of a system should be changed. And I thought,
Mm,
oh my God,
yeah.
there's a great line in a Dorian Lux poem that I just heard. We don't know what we're capable of.
Yep. Yeah,
And
exactly.
we don't know how fast we can make that progress. For her, it was only like 2 months. And I thought, if you would have asked me, could she do this in 2 months? I
You
probably,
weren't sure about
no, I
that.
wouldn't say even, but you don't know what people are capable of. And
Yeah,
I believe that we are all open to this huge possibility of expanding ourselves. And the more we expand ourselves, the more we can expand in the media. And then the more things are aligned in that way, the more that business that you want is going to come to you. Does that make
right.
sense?
Absolutely. What it also makes me think about is, when you were sharing about how she needed to go a little deeper into some stories, it reminds me of like the 5-layer cake analogy that I often use with content when building a message. Often we don't go deep enough, or we go too deep too early with how much information we're sharing. But it sounds like she was able to climb inside some of those stories and pull out those insights to share, and then felt more confident in herself. I mean, I'm kind of just making that up, but that's
Yeah,
been a
and it
lot of
was
my
also though
experience.
about knowing which details to choose. Because when you
Yes,
say go deeper, deeper doesn't mean more detail or more information. It
not
means
always. Right, right.
choosing the right information to create the picture, to create the feeling, and to
Mhm.
convey the understanding. And
Right.
that's where the consistent practice comes in,
Yes.
and then honing those stories. And when she said to me, she goes, "Oh my God, you can say you said what I meant to say." And I'm like, "Actually, I'm just taking what you're saying. You're
Yes.
the brilliant one, and I'm just shaping it." Because I'm like, "This is actually what you said," you
Well,
know.
you're the brilliant shaper then. There
A
you
good
have it.
shaper. Yeah, just maybe putting it into different order or bringing out one detail instead of another.
For
That can
sure.
make all the difference in
Yeah.
making a story pop. So it's that kind of selection process as we refine it,
Yep.
that I think
Exactly.
is connects to the audience.
Wonderful. Well, let me ask you a couple questions about that Q&A process that often happens. Well, I know that a media interview is Q&A, but do you have, for me, I think of it in terms of the end of a presentation, but do you have some tips for folks on how to come away with some mastery of that process? Because you and I have both been in situations or heard situations, and I'm sure our listeners have too, where the answers are just way too long and meandering. And what do you say for kind of your top one or two thoughts on how to do a really strong Q&A back and forth?
Yeah, so remember, you're always just managing yourself, you're not managing the other person. So it's
Mm,
self-management. So
mm,
what you want to think about, like if somebody is asking a question that's too long, is you want to be able to jump in, right?
mhm,
So there's the person who talks too long, and this can happen more. It's typically the lower levels that this happens,
mhm.
not the it's not going to happen on broadcast TV unless there's like four different hosts and they're
Oh, for
going back
sure.
and forth and you have to jump in, and then you
Right.
just have to like pick your moment and jump
Mhm.
in. But I think I can give you an example from one of my clients who was on national TV, and she was a lawyer and she was already super experienced. And I said, when you get the first opportunity in a panel, you just take it and run with it. Like, as
Yes.
say, as if you can get all four of your points in without being interrupted and without her jumping to the next person, do it. But if there's another person talking and you have something to say, even if they haven't pointed to you, if they haven't moved the camera to you, jump in and add it, because if
Mhm.
you're adding something relevant, then the
Mhm.
camera will come to you.
Yes.
You're not going to interrupt the person, but you want to jump on that. And you can say a quick transition by like, say, you can do a quick transition by saying, "Oh, I totally agree with that," or "I don't agree with that." Like either
Mhm.
way, right? Or there's a statistic that supports, because then you're
Relevant.
you're
Right.
you're relevant and you're connecting with that person
Timely.
too.
Mhm.
Like when you only say time you would say I disagree, is if you really want to be controversial and you want to
Yes. Right.
the thing. So do that very consciously, because you don't want to like create a rift between you and the other
Right.
panelists, unless
Right.
unless it's a purposeful rift for for something that's really important.
Right.
And you're not personally dissing them, but you're furthering the conversation in a way that's just going to make things snap
Yes.
back.
I love that.
So there's a polite way to do that. And
Right.
then even if you're in a conversation with somebody with it back and forth, you can say, you can say something like, "I've got a thought on that," or
Yep.
and just be able to jump in. One of the quickest ways to jump in, and I learned this when I was in HR at Pacific Bell Directory, the Yellow Pages, when I was a consultant there for 10 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I role played and did interviews with over 3,000 people. And so I was
Oh my gosh.
so that's part of where I got
Yeah, you
my,
cut your teeth on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that.
So what they did this to me. That's how I learned it from
Yes, for
so
sure.
when we would put people through role play, and I would be trying to get off the phone. I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to buy, and try to get off the
Mm.
phone for like, and they would say, they would say, Joan, or whatever my name was for the day. So they'd say Susan, and I'd always go, yes. And I was trying to get off the phone, and then they go, blah, 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 blah. And they'd say their point. And then I go, okay, no, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they'd say, Susan. And I would go, yes. So saying
I'm sensing a
somebody's
pattern.
name is
Yes,
the biggest, best pattern interrupt that you can ever do to
yes,
just change the conversation, like on a
great.
dime, because everybody, whether they want to respond or not, I didn't want to respond, and I did it like 4 times in a row.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
usually people like the sound of their own name, but I suppose in this case, maybe not all the time, but
Well, I was
it
trying
is
to
a
get off the phone. I was trying to end
showstopper.
the
Yeah,
conversation so we could move on.
totally.
No, every single time they got me back into the conversation
Yes, with your
each time,
name.
which is
Yeah.
just so we think that sometimes it's the simplest thing that works the best.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Such great tips, Susan. We are all just going to be able to I'm learning stuff right now as I'm
Yeah,
listening to you
that makes
that
me so
even
happy
I
because you're such
do.
a pro, and you're
Oh
like
my gosh. Oh,
you know all the things, you know all the
well,
techniques.
but we all have our own little special tricks that work in certain situations. And so I'm sure the reverse would be true if you were interviewing me, right? So it's fun to add to our little, bags that we carry around with tools,
The
and we
bags,
can help.
the
The,
technique and tool
yeah,
and
exactly.
transmutational bag.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, exactly. Well, let's wrap up because I know we're close to the end of our time. Let's wrap with one rapid fire question that I like to ask all my guests. And it's around any books you're reading right now, sitting on your nightstand or
so
in
you
your office.
asked, so I brought a tiny
Yes,
stack.
I
I've got
love
like
it.
about 10 more.
Yes.
So, one of the things that, it's interesting, I'm reading this one book called Mental Training for Peak Performance. It's an older one, but it's
Okay.
got some really fascinating things about Olympic athletes and their training. But what I wanted to say is I'm also reading a fiction book called Shadow and Bone by Lee Bardugo. It's a middle age book, and actually I finished it. But the
Okay.
one thing that I loved about that book was that, because I think this pertains to all people, there was a girl in it, and she had sort of tamped down her power,
Mm.
because she wanted to stay in the same place, which was safe. And
Mm.
yeah, and I think,
I'm getting what you're throwing down. Yeah.
yeah, I think we all have that. And when you start to do publicity and shift from private to public person, you are opening in a different way. And she was sort of the sun summoner. And I think that we want to summon all of our light,
Yes, for sure.
to share it with people, because whatever message you have, it's important to get out there, whatever your offer is, and
Mhm.
you are, the sun summoner for your
Right.
own brand, and to
Right.
be able to, I know it's a process, and just saying this doesn't make it so, but really start to open to the possibilities of your complete power.
I love that. What a great kind of lasting thought, which apparently we've learned today is really important. So well done
Oh,
on that.
right. Oh, thank you. Of course, I forgot that. So thank
Right?
you for
No, I
reminding
love
me,
that.
wonderful
I love
mentor
that.
teacher. Yeah.
Well, I think that in media training, it's such a scary place for so many people. In fact, I just watched a group I know not do real well on like a Fox News thing that it was very deer in the headlights. And I thought, oh my goodness, I put my hand on my heart,
Yeah.
just wanting those folks to shine. And so, yeah, getting out and knowing that you have this incredible capacity to grow and become more, and to be unafraid with these moments that can really catapult you, your brand, your business, your clients, and advance you. Those are some great reflective stories that are in that book. It sounds like a great character to dig deeper into. So that's great. That's great. Thank you, Susan. This was really fun. You are someone I really enjoy reading about when I cross your stuff on LinkedIn or your blog posts.
Same. I
And
always read yours
oh,
from top
thank
to
you.
bottom, like
Yes,
learn.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. How can people find you, Susan? I know you're at LinkedIn, so I really encourage everyone here who's watching and listening to just, throw out a request to connect with Susan. And what else, Susan, do you have anything else to share with resources where people can find you?
Yeah, so puresecrets.com, that's my website. And there's actually a whole place on my website that says goodies or free
Oh,
things. So I have a lot of free things on there, the 100-word email that can get the media to call you, the 50 plus places where you can get placed in magazines. So I have a lot of free things there. And I'm going to be giving a number of workshops on LinkedIn. So through LinkedIn. So I've got one coming up. I don't know when this is going to air. So I've got a couple coming up. So
okay.
look for those. I don't know how people find those exactly, but they're I
Hmm.
pop them up as events. I don't think that they're going to see them unless they're connected to me. So
Probably not. That would be my guess. Yeah. So
maybe what
connect
we
to
can
Susan.
do is have, if I could be so bold, is
Please.
have you share some.
Yes, I would be happy to.
Ask for what you want. The worst can
That's
happen.
right. And make sure it's recorded.
I'm gonna make
Exactly.
sure I'm gonna ping you and send them to you so you can pop them up to your
I
network.
would be more than happy to do
Thank
that. And
you.
serious value bombs here, people, with regard to what Susan's offering for free. And just in terms of the whole podcast here today has been great. So I'll be sharing this with all of my network, and in many instances with specific clients or connections I have who are upping their game in media training and need your help. So
And
thank
same
you,
with me for
Susan.
people who do presentations, because that's not something that's a specialty.
Yeah, well, I would love
Yeah,
to meet anyone else in your network, and that's exactly one of my areas of passion, and that's how we connected as well from some of the writing I was doing about those. So, Susan, this was super fun.
thank
Thank you for
you.
coming and
Thank you
joining
so
me
much.
today. And for all of you watching and listening, yes, definitely give this a like or a share and go find Susan on LinkedIn, and stay tuned. We'll be back with another episode of Getting to the Point in the near future. Until then, get out there and nail it. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.